going to tell you something that nobody else is going to tell you. Something that might make you uncomfortable at first, but once you understand it, once you really let it sink in, it's going to change everything about how you approach these precious years you have left. You see, we've been conditioned our entire lives to believe that aging is about slowing down, about becoming less, about fading into the background, while the younger generation takes center stage. But I'm here to tell you that's complete nonsense. The greatest transformation of your life doesn't happen when you're young and full of energy, chasing after every shiny object that crosses your path. No, the real magic happens when you reach that stage where you finally understand that your time, your energy, your very presence in this world is too valuable to waste on things that don't serve your highest good. And here's the part that might shock you. The most powerful thing you can do in your later years is to focus entirely on yourself and learn the sacred art of staying silent. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this sounds selfish. You're thinking that you've spent your whole life being there for others, and now I'm telling you to turn inward? Yes, that's exactly what I'm telling you. Because here's what nobody wants to admit. You cannot pour from an empty cup. And most people in their later years are running on fumes, giving away the last drops of their energy to people who wouldn't give them a second thought if the roles were reversed. You've earned the right to be selective. You've earned the right to protect your peace. You've earned the right to say no without explanation, to step back without guilt, to choose yourself without apology. Think about it for a moment. How many years have you spent explaining yourself to people who are never going to understand you anyway? How many hours have you wasted trying to convince someone of your worth, trying to prove your value, trying to make them see what you bring to the table? And where did it get you? Did they suddenly wake up one day and appreciate everything you did? Did they finally see your sacrifices? Or did they just keep taking and taking until there was nothing left to take? I've watched countless people reach their 60s, 70s, 80s, still fighting the same battles they fought in their 20s. Still trying to win approval from people who decided long ago that nothing they did would ever be good enough. And you know what happens to these people? They die exhausted, unfulfilled, bitter, wondering why life never gave them the peace they deserved. But life was offering them peace all along. They just never learned how to stop talking long enough to receive it. Silence is not weakness. I need you to understand this at the deepest level. In a world that never stops talking, that never stops demanding, that never stops judging, your silence becomes your superpower. When you stop explaining, you stop giving people ammunition to use against you. When you stop defending yourself, you stop engaging in battles that were designed to drain you. When you stop trying to make people understand your choices, you free yourself from the prison of their opinion. You see, every word you speak is energy. Every explanation you give is power flowing out of you. And most of the time, you're giving that power to people who don't deserve it, who won't appreciate it, who will use it to fuel their own agendas while leaving you depleted. I spent years of my life believing that communication was always the answer. I thought if I could just explain myself clearly enough, if I could just make them see my perspective, if I could just find the right words, then everything would be resolved. But I was wrong. Some people don't want resolution. Some people don't want understanding. Some people thrive on chaos, on drama, on keeping you engaged in their dysfunction because it makes them feel important, makes them feel powerful, makes them feel less alone in their misery. And the moment you realize this, the moment you truly comprehend that your words are wasted on certain individuals, that's the moment you begin to reclaim your life. Your later years are not the time for explanations. They're not the time for justifications. They're not the time for proving anything to anyone. These years are for harvesting everything you've learned, for enjoying the fruits of your labor, for finally giving yourself permission to live on your own terms without the constant noise of other people's expectations. But here's the challenge. You've been programmed since birth to put others first. Your parents taught you to be polite, to be accommodating, to always consider how your actions affect others. Society reinforced this message 1,000 different ways, telling you that your value comes from your usefulness to others, from your willingness to sacrifice, from your ability to make everyone around you comfortable, even at the expense of your own comfort. And now, after decades of this conditioning, I'm asking you to do something radical. I'm asking you to deprogram yourself. I'm asking you to look at all those beliefs you've been carrying around like sacred truths and question every single one of them. Who said you have to answer every phone call? Who said you have to attend every family gathering? Who said you have to maintain relationships that drain you just because you share DNA or history? Who made these rules, and why are you still following them? The answer is going to make you uncomfortable. You're following them because you're afraid. You're afraid of being called selfish. You're afraid of being misunderstood. You're afraid of being alone. You're afraid that if you stop performing, if you stop being everything to everyone, you'll discover that nobody actually cared about you at all. They only cared about what you could do for them. But let me tell you something that might sting at first, but will ultimately set you free. If the only reason people want you around is because of what you do for them, then you're not in relationships, you're in transactions. And transactional relationships will never fill the void inside you. They'll never give you the deep connection you crave. They'll never make you feel truly seen, truly valued, truly loved. Others, they'll just keep you busy, keep you distracted, keep you from facing the one thing you've been avoiding your entire life, yourself. Because focusing on yourself isn't just about self-care routines and bubble baths, though those things have their place. It's about confronting who you really are when nobody else is watching, when there's no audience to perform for, when there's no role to play. It's about asking yourself the hard questions. Who am I beyond what I do for others? What do I actually want from the time I have left? What dreams did I abandon because everyone told me they were impractical? What parts of myself did I suppress because they didn't fit the image others had of me? Most people spend their entire life running from these questions. They stay busy, they stay needed, they stay engaged in everyone else's drama because the alternative, sitting with themselves in silence, terrifies them. But I'm here to tell you that the fear is worse than the reality. On the other side of that fear is a freedom you can't even imagine right now. It's the freedom to wake up in the morning and ask yourself what you want to do today, not what everyone else needs you to do. And end of the day is the freedom to pursue interests that have nothing to do with productivity or usefulness, to learn something new just because it fascinates you, to spend hours on activities that serve no purpose other than bringing you joy. It's the freedom to look at your calendar and see empty space, not as something to fill, but as something to protect, as precious time that belongs to you and you alone. And the world is going to resist this when you start focusing on yourself, when you start staying silent instead of engaging, when you start setting boundaries without explanation. People are going to push back. They're going to call you cold. They're going to say you've changed, and not in a good way. They're going to accuse you of being selfish, of abandoning your responsibilities, of forgetting where you came from. They're going to try every manipulation tactic they know to pull you back into your old role, back into being the person who was always available, always accommodating, always willing to put their needs last. And this is where your silence becomes crucial. Because the moment you start defending your choices, the moment you start explaining why you need this, the moment you try to make them understand, you've already lost. You've given them an opening to argue, to negotiate, to make you feel guilty. But when you stay silent, when you simply smile and change the subject, when you let their accusations bounce off you without engagement, you maintain your power. You're not being rude. You're not being mean. You're simply refusing to participate in a conversation that serves no purpose other than to make you feel bad about prioritizing your own well-being. And here's what's fascinating. Most people will eventually adjust. Some will drop away, and that's okay because they were never meant to be part of this chapter of your life anyway. Others will learn to respect your boundaries, will learn that you're no longer available for their drama. will learn to engage with you in more meaningful ways because the old ways no longer work. And a precious few, will actually understand what you're doing and support you in it because they've been wanting to do the same thing but didn't have the courage until they saw you do it first. Your later years are not a waiting room. They're not a holding pattern until the inevitable happens. They're not the time to just exist while you count down the days. These years can be the most vibrant, most authentic, most fulfilling period of your entire life if you're willing to make some uncomfortable choices. And the first uncomfortable choice is accepting that you don't owe anyone anything. Not your time, not your energy, not your presence, not your participation. You already paid your dues, you already showed up, you already did the work. Now it's time to collect your reward, and your reward is the freedom to live according to your own values, your own desires, your own vision of what a good life looks like. But freedom comes with responsibility. The responsibility to know yourself well enough to make good choices. The responsibility to be honest about what truly matters to you versus what you've been conditioned to think matters. The responsibility to face your fears instead of numbing them with busyness. The responsibility to stop blaming others for your circumstances and start taking full ownership of how you spend your remaining time. Because that's what we're talking about here, time. The most finite, most precious resource you have. You can always make more money. You can always meet new people. You can always learn new skills. But you can't make more time. Once it's gone forever. And every minute you spend engaged in activities that don't serve you, every hour you give to people who don't appreciate you, every day you waste trying to fix things that aren't your responsibility to fix, that's time you're never getting back. I want you to imagine something with me for a moment. Imagine you're at the end of your life looking back at these years we're talking about right now. What do you want to see when you look back? Do you want to see yourself still fighting the same battles, still trying to win approval from people who were never going to give it? Still sacrificing your peace for people who took it for granted? Or do you want to see yourself finally free, finally at peace, finally living authentically without apology? The choice is yours. But here's the thing. You can't have both. You can't maintain your old patterns and expect different results. You can't keep engaging with dysfunction and expect to find peace. You can't keep explaining yourself to people who refuse to understand and expect to feel empowered. Something has to change, and that something is you. Not because there's anything wrong with you, but because the version of you that got you to this point isn't equipped to get you where you need to go next. That version of you was built for survival, for earning love, for proving worth, but you don't need to survive anymore, you need to thrive. You don't need to earn love anymore, you need to give it to yourself. You don't need to prove your worth anymore, you need to simply know it deep in your bones without any external validation required. And the path to this transformation runs directly through silence and self-sufficiency. Being sufficiently evolved and full destiny. Now, when I talk about staying silent, I'm not talking about becoming a hermit or cutting off all human contact. I'm talking about being selective with your words, being intentional with your communication, being strategic about what you share and with whom. There's a difference between being authentically quiet and being suppressively silent. Authentic quietness comes from a place of power, of choice, of knowing that your thoughts and feelings are valuable enough that you don't need to broadcast them to everyone. Suppressive silence comes from fear, from feeling like your voice doesn't matter, from being shut down so many times that you've given up trying to be heard. The silence I'm advocating for is the former, not the latter. It's conscious, deliberate, empowering. Think about the most powerful people you've encountered in your life. Not the loudest people, not the most opinionated people, but the truly powerful ones. What did they have in common? They didn't feel the need to fill every silence. They didn't feel compelled to have an opinion on everything. They didn't waste their words on trivial matters. When they spoke, it meant something because they were selective about when they opened their mouths. They understood something that most people never learn. Less is more. One well-placed sentence can have more impact than an hour-long speech. One moment of powerful silence can communicate more than 1,000 explanations. Your presence, when it's grounded and centered and completely comfortable with itself, speaks louder than any words ever could. But getting to that place of centered presence requires work. It requires that you develop a relationship with yourself, and for most people, that relationship is virtually non-existent. You know how to be a parent, a spouse, an employee, a friend, a sibling. You know how to play all these roles that others have assigned to you, but do you know how to just be you? Do you know you think about things independent of what you're supposed to think? Do you know what you enjoy independent of what others enjoy doing with you? Do you know what your values are independent of the values you inherited from your family or absorbed from your culture? These aren't easy questions, and they don't have quick answers. Developing this self-acknowledge takes time, takes reflection, takes a willingness to be uncomfortable with what you discover. Some of what you discover is going to surprise you. You might find that you've been living according to values you don't actually believe in. You might find that relationships you thought were essential to your identity are actually holding you back. You might find that the life you built, while perfectly fine, isn't the life you actually want. And then comes the real challenge, having the courage to make changes at a stage in life when most people think change is no longer possible. But I'm going to let you in on a secret. Change is always possible. Your brain doesn't stop learning, doesn't stop adapting, doesn't stop creating new neural pathways just because you've reached a certain age. In fact, the wisdom you've accumulated over the decades gives you a massive advantage in making successful changes because you're no longer operating from the blind enthusiasm of youth or the desperate need for approval. You're operating from a place of clarity, of knowing what works and what doesn't, of understanding consequences in a way that younger versions of yourself never could. So when I tell you to focus on yourself, I'm not asking you to become narcissistic or self-absorbed. I'm asking you to finally give yourself the attention, the care, the consideration that you've been giving everyone else your entire life. I'm asking you to treat yourself like you matter because you do. I'm asking you to invest in your own growth, your own happiness, your own peace with the same energy you've been investing in everyone else. And I'm asking you to do this without guilt, without apology, without constantly looking over your shoulder to see if people approve. Because here's the truth. That might be hard to accept. Most people aren't thinking about you as much as you think they are. They're too busy thinking about themselves, worrying about their own lives, dealing with their own problems. The judgment you're afraid of, the criticism you're anticipating, the rejection you're trying to avoid, most of it exists only in your mind. And the small percentage that does exist outside your mind in the opinions of others matters far less than you think it does. Someone else's opinion of you is none of your business. And let me say that again because it's important. Someone else's opinion of you is none of your business. Their thoughts about you, their judgments about your choices, their feelings about your boundaries, those all belong to them. They're not your responsibility to manage, to change, or even to respond to. You can't control what anyone thinks about you. You can be the most generous, kind, selfless person in the world and someone will still find fault with you. You can live according to everyone else's expectations and someone will still be disappointed. So if you can't win either way, why not at least make yourself happy in the process? Why not at least choose authenticity over performance, peace over approval, truth over pretense? The energy you've been spending on managing other people's perceptions could be redirected toward building the life you actually want. Think about that for a moment. All the mental energy you expend worrying about what they think, planning what to say to avoid conflict, rehearsing explanations for your choices, that's energy that could be going toward creative pursuits, toward deepening your understanding of subjects that fascinate you, toward developing skills you've always wanted to learn, toward simply enjoying the present moment without the constant background noise of anxiety about how you're being perceived. The quality of your life is directly proportional to the quality of your thoughts. If your mind is constantly occupied with others' opinions, with defending yourself, with explaining yourself, with proving yourself, then you're living in a mental prison of your own making. But the door to that prison has been unlocked this entire time. You just have to be willing to walk through it. Walking through that door means making peace with the fact that some people won't understand your transformation. Your children might think you're being selfish when you start saying no to babysitting every time they need it. Your siblings might think you're abandoning the family when you stop showing up to every gathering. Your old friends might think you've become boring when you're no longer interested in the same activities or conversations. And all of these reactions, while perhaps uncomfortable to witness, are not your problem to solve. Your job is to make everyone comfortable with your growth. Your job is to grow. Your job is to evolve. Your job is to become the fullest, most authentic expression of yourself that you can be with the time you have left. And if that makes some people uncomfortable, that discomfort is information for them to process, not a problem for you to fix. This is where staying silent becomes practical strategy rather than just philosophical concept. When someone challenges your new boundaries, your instinct is probably to explain, to justify, to make them understand why you need to make these changes. But explanation is engagement, and engagement keeps you stuck in the old dynamic. Instead, practice phrases like, "I appreciate your concern. I'm not available for that," without any elaboration. These statements don't invite debate. They don't open the door to negotiation. They simply communicate your position and leave it at that. The silence that follows, while potentially uncomfortable, is where the real power lies. In that silence, the other person has to sit with their own feelings about your boundary. They have to decide whether they're going to respect it or not. And their decision tells you everything you need to know about whether this relationship is worth continuing to invest in. Relationships that can't survive your boundaries aren't relationships worth having. This might be the hardest truth you'll have to accept in this process. We're taught that relationships require compromise, require give and take, require flexibility. And that's true to a point. But there's a difference between healthy compromise and self-abandonment. Healthy compromise is when two people work together to find solutions that honor both of their needs. Self-abandonment is when one person consistently sacrifices their needs, their preferences, their well-being to maintain peace or avoid conflict or keep someone else happy. If you've been practicing self-abandonment for years or decades in certain relationships, setting boundaries is going to feel like an earthquake to the other person. They've become accustomed to your compliance, to your flexibility, to your willingness to put them first. When that suddenly stops, they experience it as a loss, as a betrayal, as you being difficult. But you are not responsible for their feelings about your growth. You are not responsible for helping them adjust to the new you. You are not responsible for making this easy for them. Your only responsibility is to yourself, to your well-being, and to your peace. And if they can't accept that, if they can't adjust to relating to you as a person with your own needs rather than as a supporting character in their story, then they're showing you who they are. Believe them. Don't make excuses for them. Don't convince yourself that they'll change if you just give them more time. Don't tell yourself that you're being too harsh or too rigid. Trust what their behavior is telling you and act accordingly. And acting accordingly might mean limiting contact, might mean ending phone calls when they become draining, might mean declining invitations, might even mean ending relationships that no longer serve you. I know that sounds harsh. I know it goes against everything you've been taught about loyalty and commitment and sticking by people through thick and thin. But here's what nobody tells you about loyalty. It should be reciprocal. Commitment should go both ways. And sticking by someone shouldn't require you to lose yourself in the process. You can love people from a distance. You can wish them well without being actively involved in their lives. You can care about their well-being without sacrificing your own. These aren't contradictions. They're the nuanced reality of mature, healthy relationship boundaries. And learning to hold these nuances, to accept that you can feel multiple things at once, caring about someone and also needing space from them, loving your family and also recognizing they're not good for your mental health, appreciating someone's positive qualities while also acknowledging that the relationship has run its course. This is part of the wisdom that comes with age if you're willing to embrace it. But most people aren't willing. Most people would rather maintain the familiar dysfunction than face the unknown of change. They'd rather complain about their circumstances than take action to improve them. They'd rather stay in relationships that drain them than risk being alone. And if that's where you are right now, I'm not judging you. I understand it. Change is terrifying, especially when you've spent a lifetime building an identity around certain relationships and roles. Letting go of that identity, even when it's making you miserable, feels like dying. In a sense, it is a death. It's the death of who you thought you had to be, who you were told to be, who you've been pretending to be. But death isn't the end, it's transformation. It's the necessary prerequisite for rebirth. You can't become who you're meant to be without releasing who you've been. You can't step into your power without leaving behind the powerless version of yourself that others found so convenient. And that powerless version, the one that said yes when they wanted to say no, the one that smiled through discomfort, the one that prioritized everyone else's feelings above their own, that version served a purpose. It kept you safe. It helped you belong. It got you through times when you didn't have the strength or resources to stand alone. But you're not that person anymore. You have strength now. You have resources now. You have wisdom now. You have the capacity to stand alone. And more importantly, you have the understanding that standing alone is sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself. Because loneliness and solitude are not the same thing. Loneliness is feeling alone even when you're surrounded by people. Feeling unseen, unheard, misunderstood despite your best efforts to connect. Solitude is choosing to be alone, to have space to think your own thoughts, to hear your own voice, to remember who you are beneath all the roles and expectations. Solitude is where transformation happens. It's where you finally have the mental and emotional space to process everything you've experienced, to integrate the lessons, to decide who you want to be moving forward. But our culture is terrified of solitude. We're taught that being alone means something is wrong with you, that you're unlikable, that you failed at the fundamental human task of building relationships. So people stay busy, stay connected, stay engaged, even when it's killing them, because the alternative, being alone with themselves, seems worse than the slow death of self-abandonment. But I'm telling you, it's not worse. The discomfort of solitude is temporary. The pain of living a life that isn't yours, that's permanent, unless you choose differently. The awkwardness of learning to be with yourself passes. The regret of reaching the end of your life, never having truly lived, that haunts you until your final breath. So how do you begin this process? How do you start focusing on yourself and embracing silence when everything in your life is set up to prevent exactly that? You start small. You don't have to blow up your entire life overnight. You don't have to send dramatic letters to everyone explaining your transformation. You don't have to make grand announcements. You simply start making different choices, one at a time, in small ways that slowly add up to big changes. You start by noticing where you're giving your time and energy. Pay attention over the next week to how you spend your days. Notice which activities leave you feeling energized and which leave you feeling depleted. Notice which relationships feel nourishing and which feel draining. Notice which conversations you genuinely enjoy and which are just enduring out of obligation. Don't judge what you notice, just observe. Awareness is the first step toward change. Once you've developed some awareness, you start making small adjustments. Maybe you decide that you're no longer available for phone calls that last hours, where you're essentially serving as a free therapist to someone who never asked about your life. You don't need to end the friendship, you just set a boundary. When they call, you can talk for 20 minutes, and then you have something you need to do. They don't explain what that something is. You don't apologize for it. You just create the boundary and hold it. Will they be upset? Maybe. Will they adjust? Probably. And if they don't, if they can't respect this tiny boundary, then you have important information about the relationship that you can use to make further decisions. Maybe you decide that you're going to spend one morning a week doing something just for yourself, something that has no productive value, no purpose other than bringing you joy. Maybe it's sitting in a coffee shop reading. Maybe it's taking a long walk in nature. Maybe it's painting or gardening or photography or writing or any of a million things that you've been putting off because you didn't have time, even though what you really didn't have was permission to prioritize yourself. Give yourself that permission. Nobody else is going to give it to you. You're waiting for someone to tell you it's okay to choose yourself, but that day isn't coming. The only person who can release you from the prison of obligation is you. The key's in your hand. All you have to do is turn it. Maybe you decide that you're going to practice staying silent when your adult children complain about their lives instead of jumping in with advice or trying to fix their problems. This is particularly hard for parents because fixing has been your job for so long. But your children are adults now. They don't need you to fix their problems. Most of the time, they just need to vent, to process, to feel heard, and you can give them that without exhausting yourself trying to solve unsolvable situations. When they complain, you can say, that sounds really difficult, and then just listen. You don't offer suggestions unless they specifically ask for them. You don't take on their emotions as your own. You don't lie awake at night worrying about their choices. You care, you listen, and then you let them handle their own lives. This is love. This is respect. This is acknowledging that they're capable adults who can figure things out. And the mental energy you save by not trying to manage their lives can be redirected toward managing your own. Or maybe you decide that you're going to stop participating in family drama. Every family has it, those recurring conflicts, those old resentments that get rehashed every gathering, those power struggles that have been playing out for decades. You've probably played a role in this drama, maybe as mediator, maybe as referee, maybe as the one who tries to keep everyone happy. What if you just stopped? What if the next time someone tries to pull you into the middle of an argument, you simply say, I'm staying out of this one, and mean it? What if you stop taking sides, stop explaining one person to another, stop trying to make everyone get along? It's not your job to manage other people's relationships with each other. It's not your responsibility to maintain family harmony. And the freedom that comes from releasing that burden is extraordinary.